In the winter of 1959, deep in the frozen wilderness of Siberia, a passenger express train vanished from the schedule for over a week. When it was finally found, the entire convoy stood silent in the snow. The engines cold, the windows frosted, and every watch stopped at the exact same minute. This is the forgotten story of the Siberian Express that froze in motion. January 1959. The Soviet Union was locked in one of its coldest winters on record. Train number 1707, known as the Siberian Express, departed from Novosibirsk on January 25th, bound for Irkutsk. The 18-car convoy carried 63 passengers, 7 railway workers, and an enormous load of industrial machinery for the Baikal-Amur construction line. The route stretched through frozen taiga, narrow valleys, and long tunnels cut through permafrost. Infrastructure built hastily in the years after the war. Temperatures dropped to -45 degrees Celsius. The train's old diesel engine, modeled GE-2-125, was barely suited for the journey. But in the Soviet Union of 1959, trains did not stop for weather. They stopped only when ordered. That order never came. At 02:17 a.m., January 27th, the central dispatcher in Krasnoyarsk received a brief transmission from the train's radio operator. Quote, "Visibility poor, snow building, entering the mountain pass, signal weak." End quote. Those were the final words ever received from the crew. The next checkpoint, a remote station named Tinda 3, never recorded the train's arrival. It was expected by 0400 hours, but dawn came and went. By noon, railway controllers grew uneasy, yet no alarm was raised publicly. Lost radio contact was common during storms. By the second day, with no sign of train 1707, the Ministry of Railways initiated a quiet search operation. Local NKVD successor units, the KGB Transport Division, were informed. Internally, the disappearance was classified as temporary route loss. Helicopters from Irkutsk and Bratsk were deployed, but visibility was near zero. Snow buried the tracks. It took 8 days before the first visual clue emerged, a faint black smoke trace frozen mid-air like a ghost above the forest ridge. On February 2, 1959, search teams located the Siberian Express, motionless, half buried in ice, 18 kilometers east of the Chulim River crossing. It looked as if it had been moving full speed and then simply stopped. No derailment, no wreckage. The engine had stalled, the front wheels locked in the snow. The driver's body was still seated, his hand on the throttle. His eyes were open, frozen in place. Every clock inside the train, from the conductor's watch to the dining car's wall clock, read 03:11 a.m. When investigators entered the train, they found every compartment intact. Passengers were still in their seats, some with coats pulled around them, others with cups of tea still on the tables. The liquid inside had solidified into amber ice. There was no sign of panic, no evidence of an explosion or gas leak. The heating system had failed completely, and temperatures inside the cars had dropped below -40 degrees Celsius. It appeared the entire train froze before anyone could react. The locomotive's instruments recorded a sudden drop in pressure seconds before shutdown. The diesel tanks were full, the brake lines intact, yet the entire electrical system had failed simultaneously. One engineer whispered in disbelief, "It's as if time itself stopped at 03:11 a.m." The official investigation lasted 2 months. Soviet authorities released no public statement, but railway workers and local geologists later gave interviews after the fall of the USSR, revealing strange inconsistencies. The magnetic interference theory. A scientific expedition near the Yenisei River recorded unusual magnetic spikes at the same time the train vanished from radar. Some believed a geomagnetic anomaly had short-circuited the train's systems, freezing its electrical network instantly. The gas leak hypothesis. Investigators also found traces of carbon monoxide near the engine's ventilation ducts. A partial engine failure might have released toxic fumes, causing unconsciousness. The crew could have frozen before realizing what was happening. The government cover-up. According to one declassified KGB memo dated March 1959, the Ministry of Railways was instructed to cease external communications and record the event under Category 5 Transport Incident. Translation: never mention it again. The report concluded, primary cause undetermined, severe meteorological and technical failure. Unofficially, railway staff referred to it as the train that froze in motion. For decades, the story remained buried in Soviet archives. The wreck of Train 1707 was salvaged piece by piece. The locomotives melted down, the wagons reused, but the official route records for January 27, 1959 were erased from National Archives until 1992. Only after the fall of the Soviet Union did journalist Viktor Remezov uncover microfilm images showing the original dispatch logs. They confirmed the train signal was strong until 03:11 a.m. Power systems failed within seconds. The emergency brakes were never engaged. Remezov's 1995 documentary, The Frozen Line, revealed a chilling detail. The locomotive's cabin clock had been removed and kept in a regional museum in Omsk. The mechanism still showed 03:11 frozen by condensation and frost. To this day, railway workers along the Trans-Siberian route mention Train 1707 in hushed tones. It became a symbol of endurance and mystery of the Soviet era's brutal winters. In 2014, a restoration crew found remnants of the train's wheel assembly deep in permafrost near the old tunnel line. The metal had warped as if from sudden freezing, not by corrosion, but instant temperature collapse. There are no paranormal claims, no legends of ghosts, only the stubborn, cold reality of Siberia, where a mechanical failure could turn into a silent tomb within minutes. One investigator summed it up best. They didn't crash, they didn't burn, they just stopped. And in the middle of that endless white wilderness, the Siberian Express remains a frozen time capsule of 1959, a moment locked forever at 03:11 a.m. It was supposed to be a quiet evening run. Train number 19, a small regional passenger train leaving Milan for Innsbruck, cutting through the breathtaking Italian Alps. The date was November 17, 1964. The weather was turning, snow flurries brushing the mountains, the wind pushing cold air down the valleys. At 7:42 p.m., the train entered the San Gottardo tunnel system near the Italian-Austrian border. It never came out the other side. No derailment, no explosion, no distress call. Just the low hum of wind across the Alps, and the unanswered question that would haunt rescuers, families, and investigators for decades. If you love true unsolved mysteries and real-world investigations, make sure to subscribe. Because the story you're about to hear isn't fiction. It's one of Europe's most chilling unsolved transport disappearances. Train number 19 was a 5-car diesel locomotive operated by Ferrovie dello Stato, FS. It carried 46 passengers and 4 crew members, mostly commuters, some students returning home from Milan, and a few Austrian tourists heading north. The engineer, Giovanni Ricci, 42, had driven this route for over a decade. His assistant, Luca Bernardi, was only 25, eager but cautious. He had often mentioned to colleagues how unpredictable the Alps became at night. Weather reports predicted light snow, nothing unusual. At 6:35 p.m., Ricci radioed control in Verona. Leaving Chiavenna, visibility dropping but all systems normal. It was the last clear message anyone would ever receive from him. At 7:42 p.m., the train entered the San Gottardo tunnel system near the Italian-Austrian border. It never came out the other side. Operators assumed a delay, perhaps a stop inside the tunnel. But when the train failed to appear after 20 minutes, then 40, alarms were raised. By midnight, search teams were dispatched on both sides. Rescuers entered the tunnel, expecting wreckage, fire, or trapped survivors. They found nothing. The rails were cold, undisturbed, the air heavy with condensation. No sign of derailment, no debris, no burn marks. The only evidence that a train had passed was a faint layer of fresh soot near the entry, as if something massive had entered and simply vanished. For the next 6 weeks, military and alpine rescue units combed every section of the route. Helicopters scanned the valleys, divers explored nearby lakes. Snow had buried the higher paths, making progress impossible. One theory suggested the train might have been diverted onto an unfinished maintenance track inside the tunnel system, but engineers dismissed it. The secondary track ended in a sealed dead end, unused since 1958. Others speculated that the train could have derailed into a hidden shaft or ventilation route, yet geological surveys showed no gaps large enough to swallow 5 cars and 50 people. Then came a discovery: a single glove, found near the northern mouth of the tunnel, half frozen into the gravel. It matched the uniform of the train's conductor, Luigi Santini. The glove was intact, but covered in a thin layer of oily soot, unlike anything normally found on that line. Newspapers across Europe seized on the story. Train vanishes in the Alps, authorities baffled. Ghost of San Gottardo? But away from the headlines, investigators uncovered troubling details. A week before the disappearance, FS maintenance crews had reported microfractures in the tunnel's western wall, possibly from shifting permafrost. Instead of closing the line, officials decided to keep operations running to avoid financial loss during the winter season. Internal memos later revealed that train number 19's braking system had been flagged for maintenance, but the part order was delayed until December. Could a mechanical failure, combined with a rockfall or internal collapse, have caused the train to be sealed inside? When rescue teams drilled exploratory shafts months later, they still found no sign of a void or collapsed section large enough to trap the train. Adding to the mystery, one of the cargo cars attached to train number 19 wasn't standard passenger freight. It was carrying classified postal material from Milan's industrial district, later confirmed to include defense research documents and experimental radio equipment belonging to a private contractor linked to Italy's post-war intelligence program. In 1970, a declassified memo hinted at a possible NATO involvement, suggesting that sensitive materials might have been removed before official investigation began. But no agency ever claimed the cargo. No receipts, no manifests, no insurance claims. The families of the 50 missing received only a single official statement: loss presumed total, cause undetermined. For the families, the disappearance became an open wound. Maria Ricci, Giovanni's widow, visited the tunnel entrance every year on November 17th, lighting candles by the rail and leaving a letter she would never see answered. She once told a reporter, "I don't believe they vanished. I believe they were forgotten." By 1984, the last of the missing were officially declared dead. Memorial plaques were placed at both tunnel mouths, though no remains were ever found. In 1999, A Swiss construction project unearthed an abandoned rail spur 2 kilometers from the main tunnel. Engineers found rusted machinery, ancient cables, and fragments of painted metal, matching the green and cream livery used by FS passenger cars in the 1960s. Was it part of train number 19? Tests were inconclusive. The paint and corrosion dated to roughly the same period, but no serial numbers matched. The discovery reignited old theories. Some claimed a structural collapse sealed the train in an unreachable pocket. Others whispered of government retrieval operations, removing what the train carried before sealing the site forever. Today, the San Gottardo line operates safely, modernized, electrified, and mapped to the centimeter. But near the original 1964 tunnel, a small granite plaque still reads, "To those who journeyed north and never returned." Every year, hikers and railway workers leave flowers near the spot, sometimes reporting strange metallic echoes when trains pass. Engineers dismiss it as normal tunnel acoustics, but for locals, it's the sound of train number 19 still somewhere beneath the mountain, frozen in time. The disappearance of train number 19 remains one of Italy's most haunting cold cases, a blend of engineering failure, bureaucratic silence, and alpine mystery. Perhaps it was buried by a collapse that no human eye will ever see. Perhaps it was covered up, erased to protect secrets that rode that train north. Whatever the truth, the Alps have kept it. Quietly, coldly, perfectly. And as long as the tracks of San Gottardo echo under the mountain, the question will remain: where did train number 19 go? 63 people, gone, vanished without a trace. This isn't just a story about a train crash. This is the official file of an express train that left the station and never arrived at the next. No smoke, no wreck, no bodies, only a void where 63 lives used to be. How does a 300-ton steel machine simply cease to exist? For nearly a century, the disappearance of train number 247 has been filed under unsolved. Today, we open that file. Prepare yourself. Our mystery takes place far from the mountains of Austria, in a remote, forgotten corner of the American Midwest, sometime in the late 1940s. While details remain scarce, the central event is a documented fact. The train known as number 247, a standard passenger and mail route, vanished on a clear night. The passenger manifest listed 63 souls, a diverse cross-section of post-war America. There were families heading home, university students, and a significant number of mail service employees handling important government documents. The journey was short, less than 50 miles, connecting the small town of Ogden to the regional hub of Red Valley. The track was a single straight line of track, running through flat, featureless scrubland. There were no tunnels, no complex junctions, and no major water crossings. The trip was scheduled to take precisely 1 hour. At 9 p.m., train number 247 left Ogden. The locomotive, a powerful Pacific-type steam engine, sounded its final, distinct whistle. The dispatcher, a man named Carl Johnson, logged the departure and waited for the predictable all-clear from Red Valley at 10 p.m. He would wait. Forever. 10 p.m. came and went. Then 10:30. Carl Johnson, the dispatcher, initially suspected a simple engine failure in the remote plains. He initiated standard protocol, contacting the rail maintenance crews down the line. The first search parties were out by 11:30 p.m. They covered the entire 50-mile stretch, inch by inch, by the cold light of dawn. And this is where the mystery solidifies. There was
Nothing. No wreckage, no bodies, no sign of a derailment, no bent rail, not displaced gravel, not even a broken window pane. A steam engine and 6 carriages, hundreds of tons of steel, had simply vanished from a straight, flat track. Investigators theorized every possible disaster. Explosion. An explosion large enough to obliterate a train would have left a massive crater and scattered debris for miles. There was none. Abduction. The logistical nightmare of overpowering 63 people and dismantling a multi-ton train in a single hour in a public area makes this impossible. The official conclusion, reluctantly filed by federal investigators, was unprecedented. The train ceased to exist along the line. The focus of the investigation quickly turned from how the train vanished to what it was carrying. Train number 247 was known to carry high-security mail, including communications between the Pentagon and a secret research facility in the West. This gave rise to the most compelling theory: government involvement and black site experimentation. The theory suggests the area where the train vanished sits atop a forgotten military project, perhaps a facility experimenting with advanced propulsion or even spatial distortion. Witness reports, dismissed at the time as unreliable, began to resurface. Farmers living miles from the track reported an unnatural flash of light at precisely 9:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the train was due to arrive at Red Valley. They described it as a silent, powerful pulse, not a normal explosion. This theory postulates that train number 247 was either intentionally targeted for the sensitive cargo on board, posited as a series of massive rings of steel constructory lost along the line. The lack of any physical evidence allowed the supernatural and paranormal theories to flourish. The chronal displacement. The most famous and terrifying account involves a railroad engineer named Ben Crowley, who claimed the entire train, along with the 63 people, were transported into a time vortex. He claimed the rail line itself was situated on a temporary rift. He based this on reports of a ghostly occurrence years later. In 1978, a new crew working the line reported seeing an old Pacific-type steam engine approaching them at full speed. They braced for impact, but the engine passed straight through their own train, causing only a massive pressure wave. They identified the engine number from a split-second glimpse. Number 247. The Ghost Station. Even more disturbing are the tales of the Ghost Station. According to folklore, on certain nights, if you stand on the stretch of track where the train disappeared, you can faintly hear the muffled sounds of the 247. Not the sound of a living train, but the sound of the passengers themselves, trapped in a momentary loop, eternally waiting for an arrival that will never come. The mystery of train number 247 remains open, a complete, deliberate removal of a massive object and 63 souls from the face of the earth. The case of train number 247 is a masterclass in the unexplained. It challenges everything we know about physics, logistics, and proof. If you've stayed with us through this incredible journey into the impossible, you are exactly who this channel is for. We dive deep into the cold cases and lost legends, bringing you the files that the world forgot. Don't let the secrets of history disappear into the algorithm. If you value the truth, no matter how strange, then this is your cue. Hit that subscribe button now and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss our next deep dive into the unexplained. Now, the investigation moves to the comments below. Tell us, what do you think happened to the 63 passengers of train number 247?
They called it Line 5's Ghost Run. It began as a routine test trip deep beneath Moscow. A single metro car, a small crew, a short run between stations during off hours. But on November 17, 1983, that train never reached its destination. The control room saw it leave Oktyabrskaya station at 2:11 a.m., and then it was gone. No emergency signal, no derailment report, no sign of wreckage, just silence in the tunnels. In the 4 decades since, the disappearance of the Moscow Metro car number 8173 has become one of the city's most quietly suppressed mysteries. What happened in those dark tunnels that night? Why were the official reports sealed for years? And why did several of the metro workers involved later disappear or die under unclear circumstances? This is the story of the vanished metro car, a story buried under layers of bureaucracy, Soviet secrecy, and fear. In late 1983, Moscow's metro system was among the most heavily trafficked in the world. Its tunnels, some extending over 80 meters below the surface, were considered an engineering triumph and a security asset. That night, on November 17, a maintenance team prepared for a short test run on the Koltsevai line, the circular route that looped beneath the city center. The crew, engineer Viktor Kuznetsov, 38 years, veteran driver, 14 years with the metro. Technician, Yelena Morozova, 29 years old, communications operator. Assistant driver, Ivan Petrov, 26 years, relatively new recruit. They were tasked with moving a single Type E metro car, serial number 8173, from Oktyabrskaya Depot to Park Kulturi Station after routine brake maintenance. The trip should have taken under 7 minutes. At 2:11 a.m., the control panel lit up green. Train departing Oktyabrskaya. At 2:18 a.m., the system showed the car between Oktyabrskaya and Park Kulturi. At 2:19 a.m., all indicators froze. By 2:21, the signal vanished completely. Dispatchers radioed repeatedly. No response. By 2:30 a.m., an emergency team was already moving through the tunnels. They expected a minor failure, a tripped breaker, maybe a stalled motor. But the tunnel was completely clear. No wreckage, no smoke, no lights, no sound. Both ends were checked within the hour. Nothing. At first, the incident was logged as equipment malfunction, but by morning, when engineers confirmed that the car wasn't in any adjacent track or storage tunnel, panic quietly set in. Every section of the Koltsevaya line was checked manually. Still nothing. The car had simply vanished between 2 stations, a 1.3-kilometer stretch of sealed tunnel. By midday, Metro Command and KGB Transport Oversight had taken control. Reports were collected, statements rewritten. The official explanation was signal calibration error. But the technicians knew better. The automatic train control system used physical relay contacts, not digital readings. A train couldn't blink out due to calibration. One control engineer, Sergei Antonov, later said in the 1991 interview, "We checked the relays, the cameras, the power feeds. Nothing failed. The car just stopped existing in our grid." For 2 days, the section remained closed under the pretext of maintenance. At least 3 deep inspection teams went through the tunnels. They found fresh scuff marks on the rails, ending abruptly halfway through. No continuation, no debris. When one inspector, Major Sokolov, reportedly demanded to file a full report, he was transferred and never returned to metro service. The Koltsevaya line was not just a passenger route. Beneath it ran another level of tunnels, some built in the 1940s as part of Metro 2, the rumored underground transport network for military and government use. Several retired workers later claimed that the lost car had somehow entered an unauthorized side passage, likely connected to those classified tunnels. Blueprints of the area, however, told a different story. No such branch was supposed to exist between Oktyabrskaya and Park Kulturi, yet one unverified 1984 memo from the Moscow Metro Construction Bureau noted unregistered service conduits in that very section, built during wartime expansion. Could the train have diverted accidentally into one of those sealed shafts? When divers were sent into the drainage tunnels weeks later, they discovered collapsed brickwork leading into a narrow void and faint metal scraping noises reportedly heard through the walls. The search was halted the next day. Families of the missing crew were never given a body, a uniform, or a single confirmed detail. Officially, the three were listed as victims of a technical incident resulting in equipment loss. Unofficially, whispers spread among Metro staff of the train that never came out. Maintenance workers avoided the night shift for months afterwards. Some claimed to hear distant mechanical sounds in empty tunnels long after power was shut off. In 1986, the Oktyabrskaya control logs for November 1983 were reclassified. In 1990, they vanished from archives entirely. When the Soviet Union collapsed, independent journalists tried to reopen the case. One of them gained access to surviving maintenance records. Among them was a peculiar notation from the night of the disappearance. Track relay anomaly. Signal reflection beyond 1.4 kilometer point. Reflection was the key word. It meant that the signal bounced back, as if the train had entered a looped or mirrored circuit. But how could that exist in a linear, sealed tunnel? In 2005, during modernization of Line 5, workers reopened part of the tunnel for cable replacement. They found a collapsed ventilation chamber, sealed by concrete decades earlier. Inside was a narrow, waterlogged corridor descending deeper underground. Traces of old track fragments were visible beneath the debris, rusted, twisted, and unfamiliar, thinner than the mainline rails. One of the engineers later commented anonymously, "It wasn't our construction. It looked older, and it led down." In 2010, urban explorers claimed to have recorded strange metallic sounds in the same sector, though their footage was confiscated after arrest. To this day, the fate of the missing Moscow Metro car remains unsolved. Some believe it derailed into a forgotten section. Others believe it was deliberately concealed due to a classified connection with Metro 2. But what's certain is that 3 lives vanished in one of the most controlled environments on Earth, a place where nothing, not even a single light bulb, goes unaccounted for. Nearly 40 years later, the missing Moscow Metro car has become both legend and warning, a story told among operators and night staff as a reminder of what the system hides beneath its polished marble and propaganda plaques. Was it a technical failure, a hidden tunnel, or something more deliberate? No one knows. But if you ride the Moscow Metro late at night and listen closely between Oktyabrskaya and Park Kulchuri, some say you can still hear the faint hum of a train that never reached its station.
In 1951, deep in the Austrian Alps, a passenger train entered a mountain tunnel and vanished forever. Not a smudge of smoke, not a splinter of wood emerged. 32 people disappeared on a route everyone traveled. This is the story of the tunnel ghost train, the train that never came out. The Austrian highlands in 1951 were still scarred by war and reconstruction. The old railways wound through deep valleys, steep slopes, and tunnels bored through the rock of the Alps. One of the most scenic yet dangerous routes was between Salzburg and Innsbruck, where a series of tunnels passed through the Dachstein Range. On October 12, 1951, a standard local passenger train, Train 713, departed Salzburg in late afternoon. It carried 25 passengers and 7 railway staff. Many were returning home after visiting family in Vienna. A few were tourists enjoying seasonal foliage. The train was a steam locomotive pulling 3 wooden passenger cars. The weather was crisp, the air turning cold, and the sky overcast. Among the passengers, an elderly couple visiting their granddaughter in Innsbruck, a schoolteacher returning to her post, 2 men rumored to carry diplomatic mail, a young engineer planning to help rebuild alpine tunnels. The conductor,
Franz Radl, was known as steady and reliable. Locals trusted him. The engineer, Karl Weingartner, had navigated Alpine passes for over 2 decades and knew risk. The most foreboding stretch was the Grosser Stein Tunnel, about 3.5 kilometers long, carved through jagged rock and perched above a sheer gorge. It was normal for the train to enter and emerge into blinding twilight, but on that night, it did not. At 1847, train 713 approached the tunnel mouth. Some passengers peered forward, expecting the glow at the far end. The lamps on the front car glowed orange, casting long shadows into the tunnel's maw. The whistle echoed, then faded. At 1903, the last radio signal was sent by the conductor to the next station, Steinbrück. Entering Grosserstein. All is well. Then, silence. No further transmissions, no whistles blown, no emergency call. The tunnel swallowed them. When the train failed to arrive in Innsbruck at 1945, railway control in Salzburg began attempts to contact the train. None succeeded. By midnight, crews with lanterns and small search parties had begun clearing debris and sweeping tracks along the valley access roads. Miners and railway employees drilled side tunnels to listen for cries or steam. Locals lit fires in the mountain passes to spot smoke. The snow line was imminent. Any rescue delay would be perilous. Railway engineers inspected the tunnel entrance and exit, both intact. The rock faces showed no signs of explosion or collapse. The rails past the tunnel's mouth were undisturbed. The signals and switches along the track were normal. There was no derailed car, no splintered wood, no scrap metal. On the second day, a shepherd on a ridge overlooking the northern face of the tunnel claimed to have seen a faint glowing light deep in the mountain, far beyond the portal. But when he telephoned it in, search parties found nothing. On the third day, snow began to fall across the high passes, hampering aerial reconnaissance and ground movement. After 1 week, officials declared Train 713 missing. The region's memory would haunt it forever. Investigators gathered hypotheses. Tunnel collapse or rockfall? Perhaps a hidden rockslide inside the tunnel destroyed the train. But that would likely leave retrievable fragments at the entrance. None were found. Fire and smoke asphyxiation. A coal-fired locomotive threw sparks, perhaps dry old timber or coal dust ignited, creating smoke and panic. But wooden carriages show no scorched remains at entrances. Sabotage or political intrigue. Post-war Austria was unstable. Factions might have targeted a train carrying officials or secret mail. Some claimed the train carried diplomatic envelopes, but no record or motive was ever verified. Secret side tunnel or undocumented branch. Some old tunnel map drafts suggested an aborted branch off the main tunnel, an underground siding never fully documented. Could Train 713 have been diverted or forced off course? If so, its cars might lie hidden underground, unreached by searchers. Deep burial hypothesis. Over the decades, rockfall and seismic activity may have shifted debris to completely bury the wreck beyond detection. If embedded deep in the mountain's core, rescue is impossible without full-scale mining. Each theory had supporters, detractors, and no conclusive proof. Years later, in 1972, a spelunking club suffered a rockfall near the tunnel's interior. Their passages briefly exposed what appeared to be rail track and wood fragments beyond known tunnel segments. The fragments were photographed, then vanished behind shifting rock again. Investigators never fully explored that chamber, deemed too dangerous. In 1998, an amateur historian uncovered old railway company maps hidden in a regional archive. One map showed a faint dashed line parallel to the main tunnel, labeled "not fertig," or incomplete branch. The dashed line terminated deep within the mountain, beyond Station G, close to where the missing train would have been. This revived speculation that Train 713 might have slipped into a partially built side chamber. Local lore grew. In foggy nights, hikers reported hearing distant steam whistles deep inside the mountain. Some swore the light of a train car would flicker beyond rock walls. Others avoided the tunnel entirely, believing it haunted by souls forever trapped. In 2005, a joint Austrian-Swiss team launched a geological scan using ground-penetrating radar, GPR, along the tunnel's interior. The scans revealed a hollow void region about 800 meters beyond the southern portal, coinciding with the supposed dashed branch on old maps. But the rock overhead was estimated at 100 meters thick, and no further access was possible. In 2011, micro-drilling was attempted. A borehole of 1 meter diameter punched into the void space uncovered debris, broken rails, wood splinters, a rusted piece of metal stamped 713. The sample was confiscated by railway authorities. No public announcement was made. Some engineers later claimed the metal had been planted to provoke closure of the case. Modern analysis of old passenger manifests revealed that 2 known anti-communist operatives were aboard the train, names scratched out in later copies. Some historians argue the train may have carried sensitive political documents and that a covert action removed it. Still, none of these claims have official confirmation. 32 of the estimated 48 passengers were never accounted for. Official records list 39 missing. Families waited, graveyards erected cenotaphs, poets wrote elegies. Village churches read names in solemn remembrance. Each December 12, locals gather at the southern tunnel portal. Lanterns lit, whistle blown. In silence, they remember Train 713, the passengers, the crew, the mystery unclosed. The tunnel ghost train of Austria is not just a story of steel and stone. It is a study in loss, in unanswered questions, in how nature and history conspire to bury truth. Even today, the mountain keeps its secret, and those who pass that tunnel do so with a hush, half expecting to hear a whistle echo or to glimpse a light deep inside where no man ever returned. Until someone drills through the rock and recovers the train's bones, Train 713 remains the greatest railroad ghost story of the Alps.
In the winter of 1962, a passenger train known as Number 606 departed from Denver, Colorado, bound for Salt Lake City, Utah. It was a routine overnight journey through the Rocky Mountains, carrying 48 passengers, 2 conductors, and an engineer. But somewhere between the towns of Glenwood Springs and Green River, the train simply vanished. No wreckage, no survivors, no trace. What followed was one of the strangest and most unsettling railway investigations in American history, a case that remains unsolved to this day. December 12, 1962. The Rocky Mountains were in the grip of a fierce winter. Temperatures dropped below -15 degrees Celsius, and snow covered the tracks like a white desert. At 9:47 p.m., train number 606 left Denver Union Station right on schedule. Witnesses recalled the steam and smoke rising above the platform, passengers bundled in coats and hats, families waving goodbye.
The train consisted of 5 passenger cars, 1 dining car, and a locomotive engine, a diesel-electric EMD F7 unit. Among those on board, a young couple heading to Utah for their honeymoon, a group of traveling salesmen, 2 nuns from St. Mary's Convent in Pueblo, an army sergeant returning home for Christmas. The train's engineer, Harold J. Clements, was a 27-year veteran of the line, known for being calm, methodical, and by the book. Everything was normal until the mountains swallowed the train. At 11:22 p.m., dispatchers in Denver received the last routine radio check from train number 606 near Dotsero, a small rail junction west of Glenwood Springs. Clements reported, "Visibility's dropping, heavy snow along the pass, but we're moving steady. Should be at the next station by midnight." That was it. No distress call, no mechanical warning, no emergency signal ever came through. When the dispatcher tried to contact 606 at 12:10 a.m., there was silence. By 1 a.m., Salt Lake City reported the train overdue. By 2:30 a.m., the line was officially marked missing. At dawn, railway crews began a search along the entire mountain stretch, over 200 miles of track. Snowplows cleared paths, helicopters scanned valleys, and local sheriffs coordinated with volunteers. They expected to find a derailment, perhaps in a ravine or beneath an avalanche. But there was nothing. The tracks beyond Glenwood Springs were unbroken. Every signal light worked. There were no signs of damage, skid marks, or debris. A helicopter pilot later said, "It was as if the mountain just closed over it." The most baffling clue came 3 days later, when a track inspector near Thompson Springs discovered something odd: freshly disturbed snow near a siding that hadn't been used in years. The snow had melted slightly, revealing a set of faint wheel imprints leading off the main line and ending abruptly at the edge of a frozen river. No train, no bodies, no explanation. By mid-December, newspapers across the U.S. were calling it the vanished train of the Rockies. Theories flooded in. Some said an avalanche buried it deep in the mountains. Others believed the train had taken a wrong switch and gone off the rails into a canyon. But the most unnerving reports came from nearby towns. Locals claimed they saw strange lights in the sky that night hovering over the valley where the train disappeared. The U.S. Air Force briefly joined the search, suspecting a crash or signal interference, but quickly withdrew without comment. Railroad investigators grew desperate. They drained parts of the Colorado River near Cisco, suspecting the train may have fallen in, but the riverbed revealed nothing but twisted metal debris from older wrecks. The families of the passengers began to lose hope. In February 1963, 2 retired railroad workers, Frank Dorset and Ellie Hanlon, came forward with a bizarre story. They claimed that back in the 1940s, the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad had begun construction on a tunnel project north of Thompson Canyon, a shortcut through the mountains. The tunnel was abandoned midway due to budget cuts, and the entrance was sealed. However, the coordinates of that tunnel matched suspiciously close to where the snow tracks were found. When authorities reopened the site, they discovered an old concrete portal, half buried in snow and ice. Inside, it extended nearly 600 feet before collapsing into rubble. At the entrance, they found a rusted railway switch lever still in the open position. It shouldn't have been. Experts believe it's possible the switch was accidentally triggered, redirecting train 606 off the main line, sending it into the unfinished tunnel. But even if that were true, where was the train? The tunnel ended abruptly, blocked by tons of rock. No trace of metal, no wood, no fragments. Almost as if the mountain had erased it. 17 years later, in 1979, during geological surveying for a new highway, a team drilling near the old tunnel site reported hitting hollow space beneath the mountain, about 90 meters deep. When they lowered a camera into the cavity, the grainy black and white footage showed something unmistakable: the outline of a rail car, rusting, silent, entombed in stone. The footage was turned over to state authorities, but before excavation could begin, a landslide hit the area following heavy rain. The site was sealed permanently. Official reports listed the footage as inconclusive. No public release was ever made. To this day, the location remains restricted by the Department of Transportation. Even now, historians and rail enthusiasts debate what truly happened to train number 606. Some claim the train derailed into an underground fault, swallowed by shifting rock. Others believe the tunnel collapsed, buried it completely, creating a sealed chamber. And then there are those who whisper that the train was part of a classified military transport and that its disappearance was deliberately covered up. No official wreckage, no remains, and no definitive explanation have ever surfaced. Only the faint echo of a train whistle reported by hikers near Thompson Canyon every December night since 1962. Every winter, as snow falls over the Rockies, locals still talk about the train that never arrived. Its passengers frozen in time, its story buried in silence. Train number 606 remains one of the most enduring transportation mysteries in American history. And until the mountain gives up its secret, it always will.
It was supposed to be an ordinary overnight freight run from Calgary to Vancouver, a routine journey through the Rockies that hundreds of trains had made before. But on March 14, 1972, something went terribly wrong. A Canadian Pacific freight train, Train 117, carrying 21 crew members, entered the Fraser Canyon tunnel system and was never seen emerging from the other side. No explosion, no wreckage, no distress call, just silence. For decades, investigators, families, and railway workers have tried to uncover what really happened that night, but every answer only leads to more questions. If you're fascinated by real unsolved cases and stories that history tried to forget, you'll want to follow this journey to the very end. And make sure to subscribe, because this is only one of many forgotten mysteries that deserve to be heard again. Beneath the myths and the silence lies something far more human, a story of warning signs ignored, lives lost, and a mountain that never gave back what it took. The Fraser Canyon Line was among the most treacherous in Canada, a narrow rail corridor carved into mountain walls, where snowmelt turned rock into mud and avalanches could bury a locomotive in seconds. In the early 1970s, safety systems were primitive. Radio signals barely carried through tunnels, and trains often relied on timing and manual reports from signal houses. Train 117 was scheduled to pass through Mount McDonald Tunnel just after midnight, hauling 48 cars of mixed freight, including refrigerated cargo, fuel tanks, and steel. The weather reports warned of a storm approaching from the Pacific, but the dispatcher cleared the train anyway. That decision would haunt everyone involved. At 12:13 a.m., radio logs recorded a brief transmission from engineer Thomas Gray, the train's captain for the night. "Visibility's dropping quick. Entering the canyon now. Will report after Tunnel 9. That was the last anyone ever heard from him.
When the train failed to appear at the Lytton signal station 23 minutes later, operators assumed a delay. Freight trains often slowed to manage grades. But as dawn broke and no visual confirmation came, concern grew. By 6 a.m., dispatchers declared an emergency and launched a search. Canadian Pacific dispatched 5 search teams, including helicopters and mountain patrols. What they found defied logic. The train's entry timestamp at the canyon checkpoint was confirmed by multiple logs. Cameras captured its headlights entering Tunnel 9, but there was no exit record. On the far side, the sensors never triggered. Teams combed both tunnel entrances, the adjacent riverbanks, and nearby service tracks. Not a single fragment of debris, no oil slicks, no broken rails. Even more puzzling, no sign of a derailment alert, no fresh scarring on the rock walls. By the third day, the operation expanded to the Fraser River, under the assumption the train might have plunged into the water during a landslide. But the river's current, swollen by rain, yielded nothing. Not a crate, not one piece of identifiable metal. With no wreckage to recover, the official investigation faced immense pressure. Families of the missing crew demanded answers. Newspapers ran sensational headlines. Train vanishes into the mountain. 21 men lost. Theories flooded in, from rock collapse to secret military involvement to an alleged diversion track used for experimental cargo. But internal memos from Canada Transport, later declassified in the 1990s, painted a far simpler and darker picture. The line had been showing signs of instability for months. Engineers had requested reinforcement of the tunnel's south entrance after discovering microfractures in February 1972. The request was marked low priority. When a heavy freight like Train 117 passed through, those weak points could have collapsed silently, sealing the train inside. In 1989, a hydroelectric project near the canyon exposed a sealed cavity roughly 60 meters underground, directly beneath the old Tunnel 9 alignment. A partial cross-section of rusted rail, twisted like wire, was found embedded in the rock. Metallurgical testing dated it to the early 1970s, a near match to Canadian Pacific's standard gauge from that period. The discovery never reached major news outlets. The contractor filed it under historical debris. But the recovered fragments, analyzed later by geologists, supported what some investigators had long suspected. A subterranean collapse during heavy rain likely forced a section of the tunnel downward, entombing the train deep under rock layers and flood sediment. If true, Train 117 never exited because it couldn't. It remained, and still remains, sealed beneath the mountain. Families of the crew, 21 men aged between 22 and 59, never received closure. Canadian Pacific quietly settled most claims by 1974, citing acts of nature. But the personal letters preserved in the Calgary Historical Archive reveal a haunting pattern. Engineer Gray had written to his wife 2 days before departure. "They're pushing us to move faster. The tracks still shift when the rain hits. It's not safe through the tunnels." Conductor Joseph Callum noted in his notebook, later found in the dispatch locker, "No one listens until something gives." It did. In 1997, a journalist named Evelyn Devereaux revisited the case for a CBC special titled "The Night the Tracks Went Silent." She interviewed retired dispatchers, maintenance workers,
and the last surviving signal operator from the route. All described the same sound that night: a deep rumble, a flash, then nothing. The mounting took everything: the crew, the cargo, and even the tracks themselves. Today, the section of the canyon where the tunnel once ran is sealed and off-limits, marked only by a small memorial plaque near the edge of the old service road. Few tourists know what lies beneath. The story exists only in archives, yellowed documents, and the fading memories of those who still remember the night the tracks went silent.